Alright, what's going on, guys? You came here for a review. Well, here it is. First Berserker Khazan is very easily a top 5 Souls-like game of all time. We got a banger on our hands. And as of right now, I'm about 30 hours into the game. Feel like I'm only halfway, but every second I've played of it so far has been absolutely peak quality. I know I have a habit of hyping games up, but the thing about Khazan is, a lot of y'all already played the demo, and that was so well received that let me just tell you that is only the appetizer. As you play, it just gets better and better and better. Now, I had to really rack my brain to find things about this game that I didn't love, but I do have a few. So we got a lot to go through in this review, a lot to say, a lot of aspects of this game that you didn't see in the demo that really transform how it plays. So without wasting much more time, let's go ahead and get straight into it. First Berserker Khazan has you playing as the once famed General Khazan, who established his legend in the Pelos Empire after defeating the Berserk dragon Hismar. But in a mysterious plot, Khazan was framed by the Emperor, labeled a traitor, and we now embark on a quest for revenge, taking back the honor that was once ours. But Khazan's body has been inhabited by a spirit, a ghost from the netherworld known as the Blade Phantom. But with Khazan's strength, the power of the Blade Phantom is exactly what he needs in order to challenge the Empire. That is your backdrop for this game and really all you need to know. Now, the game does have a sort of anime art style, but everything about it is over the top, edgy, and cool just for the sake of it. And you know what? I love it. Now, First Berserker Khazan is a Souls-like. The developers will say it's just a hardcore action RPG, but it is very clearly a Souls-like that nails the formula just as well as a game like Lies of P. And you're gonna hear me compare it to that a lot in this video because it genuinely is very similar, both in terms of quality and even the difficulty. I think First Berserker Khazan is the most difficult Souls-like I've ever played. You guys know these are my favorite genre of game, but this game made me feel old. There were a lot of times where I had to go take some breaks, and like Lies of P as well, when you get to a main boss, it's one of those situations where you know you're gonna be here for a few hours. But despite being a very hardcore game, there's a lot going on here that isn't brutal punishment by bosses. The game is set up in missions, but you're not locked out of any after beating them, and you can explore any region at any time, as well as replay any mission to refight bosses, get special loot drops from them, and there are also lots of bonus missions which are little side quests, typically easier than the main path you're on, with little mini story arcs. And these were very enjoyable, especially when I needed a break from a brick wall boss I'd met on the main path. Now we'll talk about this more in a minute, but it is also very heavily an RPG, with a full skill tree, as well as the typical Souls style leveling, as well as very in-depth armor customization that all works into your build. But again, we'll come back to all this. That pretty much gives you an overview of what you're working with in this game. Now let's talk about what you're going to be doing 99% of the time, the combat. In First Berserker Khazan, you have a choice of 3 different types of weapons: the dual wield axe and sword, a great sword, or a spear. I opted for the great sword, as I often do in these kind of games. Each one of these weapons will have its own tree in the skill tree, unlocking new abilities, combos, and powerful attacks you can do with each of them. But the core of the combat is familiar. It's a Souls-like. I know a lot of people don't like that word, but there is not a better description for it. By me saying Souls-like, you understand that there's dodges, there's parries, there's stamina management, and you're relying almost entirely on memorizing boss attack patterns. If I had to give a direct comparison on how this game plays, it's like a mix between Sekiro and Lies of P, where your parry is going to be a lot more reliable than your dodge, but you're still going to have to be dodging a lot. Khazan moves a lot like Sekiro without the jump. He's very fast, very agile, but everything you do carries that heavy weight to it like you feel in Lies of P. And if you played both those games, then I don't think there's a better way to describe it. But this combination is extremely satisfying. Everything you do in this game is satisfying, and I really love the parry sound. I never get tired of it. But this really gets fun when you start mixing in a lot of the new attacks and abilities that Khazan can unlock, which rely on your spirit gauge, the little yellow diamonds you see above your health bar, which refill as you do damage to enemies. Overall, combat is just a lot of fun and very satisfying. This is not something you'll ever get tired of, even when facing powerful enemies. And you have enough tools at your disposal where you can get creative and you're not always doing the same actions over and over again. So they absolutely nailed combat in this game. Likewise with the level design. Now again, this is where I use the term Souls-like, because by me saying that, you're going to know exactly what I mean. You have your Blade Nexus checkpoints, which act as your bonfires. You respawn there when you die. You can visit to regain all your health and healing, but it respawns all the enemies. And oftentimes after exploring for a while, you'll find shortcuts back to the Blade Nexus, so that you don't have to fight your way back over all that ground again. But again, I'm sure you guys know exactly how this works, especially if you play Souls games. And every corner of this world is worth exploring, but not only worth it, kind of a necessity. Because if you're not scouring every corner, you're gonna miss out on really needed items that if you don't have, you will be at a significant disadvantage, such as your main healing item, Netherworld Energy, which are often very out of the way to find, and I'm pretty confident I missed one or two. There are also little fetch quests spanning the entire game, such as the Jarlings, which hide in pots, and are a sort of currency to buy these special stat boosting jar helmets. And these guys are hard to find. I literally only found one during my 30 hours. Which can kind of lead me into a nitpick here. A reason these guys are so hard to find is that a lot of the world is very washed out. It's a bit of a problem with the sort of cel-shaded art style, on top of just being very monotone. This makes it really hard to find things that are hidden in corners or against other non-interactable objects. You gotta really be looking. And like I said, it's just a nitpick. I would have liked the world to be a bit more saturated, because there weren't many moments where I just stopped and looked at the environment, except upon the new area cutscenes. And if I really want to dig into that, you got a lot of this game spent in caves or sewers or rocky cliffs. Yes, there is environmental diversity, but it wasn't until about the 20-hour mark where I was like, oh, this is a really cool area. This actually surprises me. Maybe that's just me though, and I do feel kind of wrong complaining about this because the actual layout of the levels is so good. But I have delayed long enough. Let's talk about boss fights. This is the high point of the game. This is where your mettle is going to be tested, and some of these bosses are the hardest I've ever fought in a Souls-like. Like I said at the beginning, reaching a main boss in this game, you know you're gonna be there for a few hours. There were a couple I was able to beat in under 10 tries, but that was rare. Most of the time it was around 10 to 20. Now I know I'm not the best at these games, I'm probably about average, I'm not afraid to admit that, but man, these were some brutal fights. What offsets that though is the cool factor. Every boss is just really cool. You've got a great spectacle going on, which makes them feel epic. But these are memorization and rhythm based fights, like we saw in Sekiro and Lies of P. You're not going to be able to walk in here and first try them with pure luck, because a lot of these bosses have some very expansive movesets and very long combos. If you played the demo, then you really got that with the Blade Phantom. It introduces you to how these bosses are going to be more so than the Yatuga does. You gotta learn when the windows present themselves. You can't just mindlessly attack, or you'll get pulled into a long combo, run out of stamina, and get one shot. But like I said earlier, you want to rely on the parry more than the dodge, because the big windows of damage are going to come from running out your enemy's stamina. All of them have some sort of posture bar that, when depleted, allows you to do a brutal attack and get major damage off. But another part of that are weak points. Some bosses have weak points that if you hit enough, you can break and deal massive damage. And you'll know if they do because they'll glow yellow, and you definitely want to focus those. There were only a few bosses that I noticed this with, Yatuga being one of them. But definitely do not forget that this exists in the game, because it's going to turn the tide of a fight very quickly. But to give my overall thoughts on the bosses themselves, at least the ones I fought so far, there weren't any that I really disliked. The only issue I have with some of these bosses are that they inflict status effects, some of which, even if you land a perfect parry, will still get inflicted on you. I feel like if you land a successful parry, it should negate all damage, but again, that's where it encourages you to mix your game up and dodge as well, so it's just a nitpick for me. Otherwise, the roster here is solid. There weren't any that truly felt annoying. Aside from that, they're difficult. There's no artificial difficulty here. There are no times where you have no choice but to take damage. All of the bosses follow the rules that are clearly established at the very beginning of the game. And that's something a lot of these games get wrong, but not First Berserker Khazan. Now let me talk about a few negatives I have, and it's gonna sound weird, but first of all, there's too much loot. You cannot walk 5 steps in this game without picking up some new weapons or armor, which causes you very early in the game to think that it's not that important. So you're constantly in a state of, wait, what did I just pick up? And on top of that, every piece of gear has a different level, and each one has set bonuses, which is really cool because it allows you to build craft. For example, I really liked the Butcher set because it did straight damage buffs and was lightweight, but the problem is, the loot pool seems to be so big that I might go get a level 60 piece of gear with no bonus that's way better than the one I just put on for my build. So you may only get to build craft for a few seconds before the the gear you just picked up is now obsolete if you want to be at the recommended level. So I found that to be pretty frustrating. Now to offset this, there is a blacksmith you unlock pretty late on who can craft armor from specific sets. The problem is, it's so expensive that you're gonna have to dismantle pretty much every other piece of gear you have besides the one you want, and even then that may not be enough. So that's another nitpick I have. But let me balance that with something they did that's cool. In the gameplay, you probably noticed these floating red, light looking things. These are revenants of adversity, little mini boss fights you can trigger that have guaranteed loot drops. So if you ever feel that you have underleveled gear, then you can trigger one of these fights and be guaranteed some pretty good stuff. Now I only did a few of these because I never really found myself at a shortage of gear. As I mentioned, you're always getting drops, but they're there if you need them. Now I know reviews have a habit to turn into guides, that's not what I'm trying to do, so let me just give you some general thoughts. First Berserker Khazan is really good. I think this could very easily be a top 5 Souls-like of all time, not counting From Software. In my opinion, I think it's equal to Lies of P, and that's really the game I would compare it to the most, because they're very similar in structure. Lies of P wins on the story side of things and the ambiance of its world, but Khazan definitely comes on top in terms of action. Really overall, I just have to say that it's such a good game. I do have to reach a bit to find stuff I don't like. Like the whole loot thing, it was not something that was on my mind the whole time I was playing. These are just things I thought about after really considering it based on pros and cons. And I really have to think, well, what more do I want out of a Souls-like? It's got the epic bosses, it's got a great soundtrack, the combat is addicting, the lore's there with the whole DNF universe. It's got everything. And the parts that make a Souls-like good, I think it does better than well. Now again, I haven't finished it, maybe the game takes a nosedive at the end. I highly doubt it, because the more I play, the better it gets. So based on the 30 hours so far, I'm giving First Berserker Khazan a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, but I think it's pretty dang close, and definitely a must play for anyone who enjoys the Souls-like genre. I can't wait to get further into the game. I'm pretty dead stuck on a boss right now, I'm not gonna lie. One that I'm not gonna include in the video for spoiler reasons, but I can't wait to see the public reaction to this game. People love the demo, I think they're gonna love the full game even more. But y'all let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are you excited for First Berserker Khazan? I believe it is now live in early access for those that pre-ordered, so I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts. With all that though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.